feel in general about what the jurors, how they have concluded their work here, what they said?
We appreciate what the jurors have done, but they've been put in a generally impossible position. Question number 11, for example, essentially asks them to read Mr. Williams' mind. We're never going to know whether or not Mr. Williams intended to carry out on his threats from several days before to kill police officers, or if he was simply drunk and slow in responding that day.
So then, was it of no value from your perspective, then, in terms of your client and whether he finds himself exonerated ultimately? I'm saying this whole proceeding.
Absolutely not. I think that this process serves a very admirable purpose in getting the facts out for the public to take a look at, and I admire the jurors for their good work in this case.
So, Ted, only 4 jurors said that they believed that Williams posed an imminent threat of serious physical harm at the time he fired his weapon. Only 50% of the jurors. That is hardly a definitive finding exonerating the officer.
Well, what that goes to show, 4 didn't know. And of course, what we have is a situation where they're being asked to look at this in retrospect with all of the information that's available now that was not available at the time. And I think the jurors very clearly were taking into account the fact that Mr. Williams was highly intoxicated that day. Remember that the jurors only saw a slice of the overall picture. We weren't able to show the video where he was threatening police officers' lives just days before this. And all of that kind of information will be appropriate in a subsequent proceeding, a civil lawsuit, if one comes up. And I think that jurors will have a different outlook.
Prosecutors have to decide now whether to charge Ian Birk with the crime. What do you say?
I have no idea if they have any interest in that whatsoever. I think under state law it makes it very clear that they have to overcome a pretty serious burden, basically show malice on his part. And anybody that saw Ian Birk testify knows that he had no malice in his heart that day.
What does Officer Birk feel about this? What does he feel about the jurors' decisions today?
I don't know.
Is he fighting to keep his job?
His job is not in jeopardy that I'm aware of, so he'd have nothing to fight right now.
Well, they took his badge and his gun, and the preliminary finding by the Firearms Review Board was unjustified. Clearly, this is going to be a battle. Is he trying to keep his job?
Well, what I do know is that the information that the Firearms Review Board looked at for its initial analysis of this is very different than what has been shown here at this inquest. So I have no idea whether number one, I don't know if there has been a preliminary finding. I have received no such notification. So when the Firearms Review Board comes out in its final iteration, I think that's an appropriate time to talk about that.
Well, can I put it another way? Would Officer Birk like to return to Seattle Police on duty? He's on leave right now as a police officer.
Well, many of you have seen him. He's a diligent, very thoughtful, careful young man, and yes, he wants to continue his service.
What's this been like for his...
Does he violate Mr. Williams' civil rights?
No. I'm confident that in a civil proceeding we will be able to show all of the evidence relevant, and Officer Birk will be fine.
How is Officer Birk during this time?
Well, I haven't had a chance to spend much time with him, so I really can't answer that.
Well, I meant just in general.
Well, this is a stressful thing for anybody to go through, so it's been wearing on him.